The doorway itself seemed to open in slow motion, the walls of crimson light bending outward, revealing a vast expanse beyond. Voss could feel the power of the place radiating outward, resonating with the deepest parts of her soul. "Step through," the custodian leader's voice echoed, reverberating through the chamber. "To claim the truth, you must first face your own reflection. There is no turning back." Voss turned to her team, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and understanding. "We've come this far. We face whatever is next. Together." One by one, they stepped forward. The moment their feet crossed the threshold, they were engulfed in a swirling vortex of light and shadow. Their surroundings vanished in an instant, replaced by an infinite expanse of stars, vast, untouchable, and ever-expanding. It was as though they were suspended in the very fabric of the universe, the blackness of space stretching out in all directions, broken only by the swirling colors of nebula and distant galaxies. The ground beneath them was gone. There was no sky, no floor, only the endless stars. "This is the truth?" Elias asked, her voice echoing strangely in the empty void. "No," Voss said quietly. "This is the beginning of it." The stars shimmered, and slowly, images began to form in the space around them. At first, they were faint, like the distant memories of lives long past. But then they solidified, becoming clearer, sharper. Voss watched in awe as the images unfolded before her. They were visions of humanity's past, its present, and what lay ahead. She saw herself, back when she had first joined the fleet, young and full of hope, making decisions that would shape the fate of countless lives. She saw her team, Elias, Riker, at their sides during battles, in moments of triumph and in moments of defeat. She saw the sacrifices, the camaraderie, the pain of loss. But then the images shifted. She saw Earth, its cities burning, its skies darkened by war. The collapse of the old order. She saw the rise of the Crimson World, the planet that had once been a myth, now a place of dark power. And then she saw it, humanity's future. Not a future of victory, but one where their choices had led to a cycle of destruction. A future where humanity, despite its strength, had doomed itself through its own hubris. "No," Voss whispered, shaking her head. "This can't be our future." "It is," a voice responded. It was not one of her team. It was the voice of the custodian leader, but it sounded different now, more present, more alive. "This is the reflection of your potential, the truth you sought. Humanity has the power to shape its future, but it is a power that can destroy as easily as it can create." Voss felt the weight of the words press upon her. Humanity could be its own undoing, she realized. The choice had always been theirs, but it had come with a cost, one that now seemed insurmountable. "But there's another path," the voice continued. "You have come this far because you possess the strength to choose differently, to shape the future with wisdom, not power, to break the cycle of destruction." Voss's heart pounded as the vision of humanity's downfall faded and was replaced with something new, something hopeful. The image of a world reborn, of civilizations rebuilding, of people working together toward a common goal. It was a future where humanity had not conquered, but evolved. A future where their strength had become a tool for healing, not domination. "This is what you can become," the custodian said softly. "This is the truth, the potential you carry. It is yours to claim, but only if you choose it." Voss stood motionless, her mind racing. The weight of this revelation was more than she had expected, more than she could have ever anticipated. The truth wasn't just knowledge, it was a choice. And now, with the burden of that knowledge, she had to make the ultimate decision. She turned to Elias and Riker, their faces illuminated by the glow of the visions around them. They stood side by side, unwavering. "We can do this," she said, her voice steady. "We have the power to change everything." And with that, they made their choice. The stars around them shifted, the energy in the air calming. The truth had been revealed, not as a prophecy, but as a challenge. The future of humanity was in their hands. It would not be easy, it would demand sacrifice, but it would also be worth it. And together, they would shape a new destiny. The world spun for a few seconds before Voss regained her bearings. She struggled to her feet, groaning in pain, and looked around. They were no longer in the cavern. Instead, they stood in a vast open space, surrounded by strange structures that seemed to rise from the very core of the planet. The air was thick with a strange, metallic scent, and the ground shimmered with an iridescent sheen, as if it were made of liquid light. "Where the hell are we?" Elias gasped, looking around in disbelief. "This is impossible." The strange structures around them seemed to hum with energy, their surfaces covered in more of the glowing, pulsating symbols that adorned the walls of the cavern. The sheer scale of the place was overwhelming. It felt ancient yet still alive with power, as though it had been waiting for something, waiting for them. "I don't know," Voss replied, her voice tight. "But this is where it leads." A low, guttural sound echoed from somewhere deep within the structures, followed by a crackling noise that seemed to reverberate through their bones. Then, as if emerging from the walls themselves, the custodians appeared. They were no longer the silent figures from before, but now they stood tall and imposing, their forms more defined, their eyes glowing with an intensity that made the air feel thick with power. Their leader, the one who had spoken to them since the beginning, stepped forward. Its voice boomed, not in their minds this time, but in the air itself, rich with authority and something else, something almost ancient. "You have come far," the leader said, its voice resonating through the very core of the planet. "But the true trial begins now." A wave of dread washed over Voss, but she fought to keep her composure. "What do you want from us?" The custodian leader tilted its head, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something, perhaps recognition, perhaps something deeper. "We do not want anything," it replied. "We are the keepers of the truth. We are the ones who protect the knowledge that lies beneath this world. You have made it this far, but you must still prove your worth." "You said the truth is here," Elias interjected, her voice sharp. "Then give it to us. We've faced your trials, we've bled for this, and we've paid the price. We want the truth. Now." The leader's gaze locked onto her. The silence that followed was deafening. For a long moment, it seemed as though the custodians might respond. Then the leader spoke, its words slow and deliberate. "The truth is not a gift, nor is it a burden. It is a challenge. The knowledge you seek is not simply information. It is power, and power is never given freely. You must decide if you are worthy of it. You must face your ultimate test." With that, the custodian stepped aside, revealing a massive structure at the center of the chamber. A massive doorway, arching high into the sky, pulsating with crimson light. Voss's heart raced as she felt the weight of the moment. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where we find out if we're truly worthy." The team exchanged nervous glances. No words were needed. This was the final step, the last trial before the truth would be revealed. But as they approached the doorway, a deep, resonant hum filled the air, and the structure itself seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls shifted, glowing brighter than ever before, and Voss felt a surge of energy rush through her. This was more than a test, it was a reckoning. "Prepare yourselves," Voss said, her voice steady despite the storm of uncertainty in her mind. "This is where everything changes." The air around the massive doorway vibrated with energy, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The crimson light pouring from the archway intensified, casting long shadows across the strange, iridescent floor beneath them. Voss's team stood at the threshold, their resolve unwavering, but the weight of the moment was palpable. This was it, the culmination of everything they had fought for, everything they had endured. The custodians stood silent, watching from the edges of the chamber, their glowing eyes unblinking. Voss glanced back at her team, meeting Elias's intense gaze, Riker's unspoken determination. They had come this far together, and they would see it through. "We move together," Voss said, her voice strong. "No matter what lies beyond this door, we face it as one." Elias nodded, her hand resting on her weapon. Riker stood at the ready, his posture tense but steady. They were ready. With a deep breath, Voss stepped forward. As her foot touched the ground in front of the doorway, a shockwave of energy rippled through the chamber. The air hummed, and the glowing symbols on the walls brightened, their ancient script now pulsing with life, as if reacting to their presence. But the figure's laugh was hollow, and it seemed to mock her every word. "Of course you didn't, but you did it anyway, didn't you? You led me into battle. You sent me to die. You sent so many to die." Voss recoiled as the words hit their mark. The memory of Riker's death, of all the soldiers she had lost, surfaced like a torrent. She had always blamed herself for the sacrifices, always wondered if she could have done more. But now, standing before this distorted version of her loyal lieutenant, she knew the truth. No one had forced them to fight. They had chosen this path together. "I failed you," she whispered, the guilt threatening to crush her once again. "I failed everyone." The figure's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Voss thought she saw the real Riker beneath the distortion. But then it was gone, replaced by a sneer. "No," the figure said, its voice colder now. "You failed yourself." With that, the figure lunged, and this time, it wasn't just an illusion. It was a physical manifestation of all Voss's doubts and self-blame. She felt herself faltering, the weight of her failure pushing her to her knees. But just as she thought she might crumble, something inside her snapped. The years of guilt, of doubt, of carrying the responsibility of so many lives, she released it all. She let go of the past, the mistakes, and the regret. She stood tall once again, her voice steady. "I may have failed," she said, her eyes burning with new conviction, "but I will not let this define me. I will not let my past shape who I am. I am still the captain. I am still the one who chooses." The figure hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing its features before it dissolved, leaving only the empty space between them. The cavern grew quiet again, the pulsating energy of the crimson world growing softer, as if acknowledging her triumph. Voss took a deep breath, her pulse racing, but she felt something new inside her, a sense of clarity. The trial was far from over, but she had taken the first step. The custodians, watching silently, seemed to acknowledge her victory, their expressions unreadable. "You have passed the first test," the voice said, more distant now. "But there are more trials to come. Prove that you are worthy of the truth." Voss looked at her team, at Elias and Riker, and nodded. "We're not done yet. Let's finish this." And with that, they moved forward, deeper into the heart of the crimson world, toward the unknown truth that awaited them. The air grew heavier as they moved deeper into the heart of the crimson world. The cavern they traversed seemed to stretch on endlessly, its walls shifting, expanding, and contracting, as if the planet itself was alive. The glowing crimson veins running through the stone pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost sentient, like the heartbeat of the world. Captain Voss led the way, her senses heightened, every step measured. She could feel the weight of the trial still pressing on her mind, but she was stronger now. The doubts, the guilt, they had been confronted. She had faced them, and she had emerged victorious. But the custodian's cryptic warning still echoed in her thoughts. "Prove you are worthy of the truth." "How much further?" Elias asked, her voice tight, betraying the unease that had settled over her. "We're getting close," Voss replied, her eyes scanning the path ahead. "I can feel it." Behind her, Riker and Elias exchanged uneasy glances, but neither spoke. They had all been through so much already, and every step forward seemed to bring them closer to an unknown end. But no one had been willing to turn back, not after everything they had already endured. The crimson world was a place of mystery, of tests, but it was also a place of answers, answers they desperately needed. A sudden shift in the atmosphere caught their attention. The ground trembled again, this time with more intensity. The faint hum that had accompanied them throughout their journey grew louder, reverberating in their bones, causing their skin to tingle. "Something's happening," Riker said, his voice low. Before anyone could react, the walls of the cavern began to glow brighter, the crimson light intensifying until it was almost blinding. And then, as if responding to an unseen command, the air split with a thunderous crack, and the ground beneath their feet gave way. "Down!" Voss shouted, leaping forward as the floor buckled. The team followed instinctively, tumbling through the air as the cavern collapsed beneath them. For a brief moment, it seemed as if time itself had stopped. They fell, weightless, surrounded by a maelstrom of light and shadow. Then, with a bone-rattling crash, they hit the ground hard. Voss's heart raced, her instincts flaring. "Don't listen to it," she shouted, stepping forward to grab Elias's arm. But before she could act, another figure turned its attention toward her, its voice invading her thoughts. "Captain Voss, you lead with strength, but what of your humanity? How many lives have you sacrificed for the mission? How many have you condemned for your own gain?" The words struck Voss like a physical blow, a bitter truth she had long buried deep within herself. She had made tough choices in her career, decisions that weighed heavily on her conscience. The guilt was there, always lurking, and now it threatened to consume her. But she refused to fall. She clenched her fists, fighting against the emotional onslaught. "I will not falter," she muttered under her breath. "I will face whatever this is." The figure seemed to laugh, a hollow, echoing sound that reverberated throughout the chamber. "Then face it, Captain, prove your worth." With a single sudden motion, the figure lunged at her, its form shifting into something monstrous, a grotesque shadow of her own doubts and fears. But Voss stood her ground, her gaze hardening. She wasn't going to let this trial break her, not here, not now. As the figure drew near, the air in the cavern thickened, the crimson glow intensifying, as if the planet itself had recognized her resolve. The trial had begun in earnest, and only those with the strength to endure would be granted the knowledge they sought. The figure's shadow loomed before Captain Voss, its form twisting and distorting like a dark reflection of herself. It was a monstrous shape, part human, part nightmare, its eyes glowing with the same crimson energy that pulsed through the planet. Its hands reached toward her, fingers elongated and sharp, as if designed to tear apart everything she had ever known. "Face your guilt, Captain Voss," the figure growled, its voice a chorus of every regret, every hard choice she had ever made. "You cannot outrun your past. It will consume you." Voss's breath quickened, her mind racing as the weight of her decisions threatened to suffocate her. The wars she had fought, the lives lost under her command, those memories burned in her mind, and now they were physically manifesting in front of her. She staggered back, but her resolve hardened. She had chosen this path. She had accepted the burdens of command, knowing full well what it meant. She would not let this trial defeat her. "Stop!" she shouted, forcing herself to take a step forward. "You don't control me. I control my fate." The figure laughed, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the cavern. "Fate? You think you control it? You think you control anything. Everything you've done, every decision you've made, was a step toward your own undoing." But Voss refused to yield. She raised her weapon, pointing it squarely at the monstrous figure. "No, I'm more than my mistakes. I'm more than the weight of my past. I'm the one who chooses what happens next." As she fired, a wave of force exploded from her weapon, sending the figure stumbling back. But it did not dissolve or retreat. It only grew stronger, more formidable, as if her defiance fueled its existence. It came at her again, faster now, its claws slashing through the air. For a moment, Voss felt fear. The creature's power was overwhelming, its presence suffocating. But as it lunged at her, something inside her shifted. The feeling of powerlessness, of being trapped by her past, dissolved into something new. A quiet strength rose from deep within her, a recognition that no matter how strong the trial, No matter how deeply it dug into her soul, she could overcome it. With a fierce cry, she slammed the butt of her rifle into the figure's chest, forcing it back. The figure staggered, faltered, and then collapsed into a swirling mass of shadows, dissipating like smoke in the wind. Silence descended, and for the first time, Voss felt a strange weight lift from her shoulders. But before she could catch her breath, the air shimmered again, and another figure appeared before her. This one bearing a face she recognized all too well. "Riker?" she whispered, her voice faltering. The man standing before her looked like her lieutenant, but his eyes were different, cold, distant, as if he were a stranger. The figure smiled, but it was a smile twisted by anger and resentment. "You don't even know, do you, Captain? You think you're a hero, but every decision you've made, every life you've taken, has been for nothing. I followed you, I believed in you, and this is where it's led me." "Riker, no," Voss pleaded, stepping forward. I didn't choose this for you. I never wanted this." Before Voss could respond, the figure raised its other hand, and a shockwave of energy erupted from the spire, throwing the crew to the ground. The crimson light flared around them, engulfing everything in its path. And in that moment, Ilara Voss knew that their journey had only just begun, and whatever lay ahead, they were no longer just explorers. They were players in a game far older and far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The shockwave passed, but its effects lingered. The air crackled with residual energy, and the ground beneath them seemed to pulse, as though it too were alive. Captain Ilara Voss rose slowly, brushing off the dust and grime from the ground. Her head throbbed, and for a moment, the world seemed to shift around her. The strange hum of the crimson world reverberated through her body, settling into the marrow of her bones. "Everyone all right?" she called, though her voice was hoarse, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Riker, barely standing, nodded as he steadied himself against a nearby rock. "We're alive, but something's different." "Yeah," Dr. Elias said, eyes wide as she stared at the figures before them. "Something's wrong." The custodians had not moved. Their figures remained still and silent, their presence oppressive, like a weight pressing down on the crew. It was as if they were waiting for something. The voice of the custodian leader echoed once again, not through the air, but in their minds, a resonance that seemed to come from the depths of the planet itself. "You seek answers," the voice intoned, slow and deliberate. "But the truth is not given freely. Only those who prove their worth may claim what lies beneath the surface of this world." "Prove our worth," Voss muttered under her breath, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "What does that mean?" "You will find out soon enough, Captain," the voice responded cryptically. "Your trial begins now." The custodian stepped forward, and in that moment, the very ground trembled once more, but this time, it wasn't just the earth that shifted. It was the very fabric of reality itself. The sky above them darkened, swirling with crimson clouds that seemed to pulse in time with the heart of the planet. Before anyone could react, the world around them dissolved, twisting and distorting like an image viewed through a shattered lens. Voss's stomach lurched as the landscape fractured, and she felt the world rip from under her feet. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The crew stood, disoriented, in an entirely new environment. They were no longer on the surface of the crimson world, but in a vast, cavernous chamber, lit by eerie, pulsating light. The walls of the cavern were made of smooth, organic-looking material that seemed to shift and breathe like a living being. Strange symbols covered every inch of the walls, glowing with the same crimson hue that had dominated the planet's surface. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, a jagged obsidian pedestal, upon which rested a single glowing orb. The orb shimmered with a swirling ethereal energy, its surface alive with flickering patterns, like some sort of ancient memory trapped in time. "This is," Elias whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and wonder. "This is it, the heart of the planet." Voss's eyes narrowed. Stay focused. Whatever this is, we have to be ready." Without warning, the air around them began to ripple and strange, ghostly figures materialized from the walls, slowly taking shape. These figures were humanoid but disfigured, their features blurred and indistinct, as though they were trapped between two worlds. Their eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, fixed upon the crew. "Your trial," the voice intoned once more, reverberating through the cavern, "is one of flesh and will. You will face the choices you've made, the darkness within you, and the strength of your resolve." Voss's hand tightened around her weapon, but the figures did not approach them aggressively. Instead, they circled, and with each passing moment, their presence felt more invasive, probing the very hearts and minds of the crew. Dr. Elias gasped, her eyes glazing over as she swayed on her feet. It's reading my thoughts," she muttered, her voice distant. "I can't control it." A figure stepped forward, its face still obscured, but its presence overwhelming. The figure's voice echoed inside Elias's mind. "You've come seeking knowledge, but knowledge is a double-edged sword. Your heart reveals your fear, your greed. You've always longed to understand, but now you will know the cost." Elias staggered back, clutching her head. I never meant for this." "Stay alert," Voss ordered, her voice low but commanding as she surveyed the strange terrain. "We don't know what's out here." The team moved in formation, rifles at the ready, as they cautiously advanced. Dr. Rena Elias was at the front, her eyes wide with wonder and trepidation. She had spent her career studying the stars, but nothing could have prepared her for the surreal beauty of this planet. The air shimmered with a faint, pulsating light, and the very ground seemed to hum with energy. "We're not alone," Riker said, his voice tight as he scanned the horizon. "I can feel it. Something's watching us." Voss nodded, her instincts on high alert. She'd fought in countless battles, faced down enemies of every kind, but this felt different. The air seemed to carry an invisible weight, pressing down on her chest. And then there was the signal, the crimson pulse that had led them here. It still thrummed in the back of her mind, almost like a heartbeat, drawing them deeper into the planet's mysteries. The group moved forward, making their way toward a massive chasm in the distance. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, as if something was stirring deep below the surface. Dr. Elias, ever the scientist, was already muttering to herself, her mind racing with possibilities. "This place, it's not just a planet," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "It's a construct, a massive structure beneath the surface. It's like the entire world is a machine, or maybe even a living entity." Voss's eyes narrowed. "We need to find answers, Dr. Elias. Whatever this is, we're here to understand it, not to speculate." As they neared the chasm, a strange sound echoed across the landscape. It was low, reverberating through the ground like a growl or a hum. The air seemed to thicken, and the sky above them darkened, casting an eerie glow over the planet. "Captain," Riker whispered, "I think we've just triggered something." Before Voss could respond, the ground beneath them cracked open with a deafening roar. The team scattered as a massive structure emerged from the earth, a gigantic, twisting spire of metal and stone, covered in glowing crimson runes. It rose higher and higher, reaching toward the sky, its surface shifting and contorting as if it were alive. "Get back," Voss shouted, pulling her team to safety as the spire continued to rise. The air around them buzzed with energy, and a deep, low hum filled their ears, vibrating through their bones. The spire finally stopped, standing like a towering monument in the middle of the chasm. For a long moment, the crew stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to do next. Then the air shimmered, and the hum shifted into a voice that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the spire. "Welcome, children of Earth." The voice was ancient, resonant, and strangely familiar. It was not spoken in any language the crew could recognize, yet they understood it, felt it, deep in their souls. Voss's breath caught in her throat as the words hung in the air. children of Earth. The words echoed in her mind, chilling her to the core. Who, or what, was speaking to them? And how did it know they were from Earth? The ground shook again, but this time it wasn't the spire that moved. Figures began to emerge from the shadows around them, humanoid shapes cloaked in tattered robes of crimson. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods, and their movements were slow, deliberate, as if they had all the time in the universe. The creatures didn't seem to be in a hurry, but there was an undeniable presence to them, an ancient power that radiated from their very beings. Voss instinctively raised her weapon, but Dr. Elias stepped forward, her curiosity overwhelming her caution. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. One of the cloaked figures raised a hand, and the air seemed to freeze. The voice spoke again, this time directly into their minds. "We are the custodians. We are the keepers of the Crimson World, and you, travelers, have come seeking answers." Voss's eyes narrowed. "What is this place? What are you keeping here?" The figure tilted its head, its voice now tinged with something like amusement. "What you seek is not just knowledge, Captain. You seek power, but power comes at a cost." Ilias took a step forward, her voice trembling with excitement. "We didn't come for power. We came to understand. To learn." The figure's hood shifted, revealing its face, a smooth, featureless expanse, as if its skin had never known time. "Then learn you shall, but beware. This world is not what it seems. The truth you seek will challenge everything you know. Keep your eyes on the instruments." Voss called out, her gaze never leaving the console in front of her. "We're almost there. Don't let up." Lieutenant Riker, his knuckles white as he gripped the helm, shot a glance toward her. "Captain, I think we're being pushed toward the planet. These gravitational anomalies, they're pulling us in." "We'll land the ship, Riker," Voss said with a quiet, resolute confidence. "We have no other choice." The Odyssey began to buck and lurch once again, but this time it wasn't the asteroid field. They were entering the orbit of the Crimson World. As the ship's systems recalibrated, the view beyond the viewport shifted dramatically. The planet was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was a deep, violent red, swirling with storm clouds that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the signal. Jagged mountain ranges rose from the planet's surface like the bones of some ancient beast, while cracks in the land glowed with eerie, pulsating light. "It's alive," Dr. Elias murmured from her station, her eyes wide with wonder. "This planet, it's not just a world, it's a system, an organism." "Focus, Doctor," Voss commanded. "We need to land. How much time before we reach the surface?" "At current speed, we'll break through the atmosphere in 10 minutes, Riker replied, his voice tight with effort. "We're in a free fall." The crew worked in a coordinated frenzy, setting the ship's descent trajectory, adjusting shields, and compensating for the unnatural gravitational forces that seemed to warp around the planet. The Odyssey groaned under the strain, but the crew's expertise kept the ship intact. Barely. The air grew thick with tension as the countdown continued. Every second seemed to drag longer than the last. "Hold on," Voss shouted, bracing herself for the impact. Suddenly, a violent shockwave reverberated through the ship, sending everything, spinning. The gravitational pull had become too strong. The Odyssey spiraled out of control, breaking through layers of atmosphere and heading toward the jagged, unfamiliar terrain below. But just before it crashed, a strange force, unseen and unexplained, tugged at the ship, softening the blow. The Odyssey slammed into the planet's surface with a heavy thud, the ship's hull scraping against the rocky ground as it skidded to a halt. The bridge was momentarily silent. "Status report," Voss barked, regaining her composure. "We've landed, but we're not alone," Riker said, his voice laced with unease. Voss's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the exterior of the ship, now visible on the screen. The moment the Odyssey touched down, the crimson glow that had illuminated the planet's atmosphere grew more intense. The surface beneath them began to pulse, sending ripples through the soil. For a fleeting moment, Voss could have sworn she saw a shadow move against the glow of the planet. Something massive, something watching. "We need to get out there, Captain," Dr. Elias urged, her tone no longer clinical but urgent. "There's more to this world than we can understand, and we need to find out what it is." Voss stood, scanning the crew. "Prepare a team for surface deployment. Riker, Elias, and I will lead the first wave." As the crew gathered their gear and prepared for the descent into the unknown, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were forces at play on this planet, forces that seemed to be orchestrating their every move. As they donned their suits and secured their weapons, Voss glanced out the viewport, feeling a strange compulsion to look toward the horizon. "Captain," Riker said, his voice tight, "what if we're not supposed to be here? What if this planet is a trap?" "We didn't come this far to turn back," Voss replied firmly. "We're here for answers, and we're going to find them." With that, the crew prepared to descend into the crimson-lit unknown, stepping into a world that promised more danger, mystery, and perhaps unimaginable discovery. But one thing was certain: the crimson world was not the lifeless rock they had expected. It was alive, and it was waiting. As they filed into the airlock, Voss's gaze lingered on the glowing landscape outside. Something out there was calling to them, and she couldn't help but feel that whatever they found, they were not prepared for the truth that awaited them. The crimson world had secrets, secrets that could reshape the fate of humanity itself. The moment the hatch of the Odyssey opened, the air was thick with the scent of something ancient, something unlike anything the crew had encountered before. Captain Elara Voss stepped onto the surface of the crimson world, the red soil crunching beneath her boots. The landscape stretched out before them, both alien and unnervingly familiar. Jagged mountains rose from the ground, casting long, ominous shadows, while the horizon glowed faintly, as if the entire world were alive with energy. "The signal is getting stronger, Captain," Dr. Elias reported, her fingers flying across the control panel. "It's almost like it's leading us." Voss nodded, though the feeling in her gut told her that they were being drawn into something far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. The crimson signal pulsed with a rhythmic consistency now, each beat almost a taunt, a whisper that echoed in the silence of the ship. It beckoned them closer, deeper into uncharted space. But as they neared the sector where the signal originated, things began to go wrong. The first warning came when the ship's navigation system suddenly glitched. A warning light flashed across the bridge, followed by a low, metallic hum vibrating through the deck. A few officers exchanged worried glances. "Captain," Lieutenant Riker called out, his voice unusually tense, "we're experiencing gravitational interference. It's like something is pulling us off course." Voss's eyes narrowed. She immediately began assessing the situation, tapping into the ship's diagnostic systems. The Odyssey was designed to withstand the harshest conditions of deep space, but the readings on the console were unlike anything she had ever seen. It was as though the very fabric of space around them was warping, bending to some unknown force. The crimson hue that had pulsed in the signal seemed to be growing more intense, as if feeding on the ship's power. "Is it the planet?" Voss asked, her voice calm, but the weight of uncertainty was clear. "Not just the planet, Captain," Dr. Elias replied. "There's something in the region beyond. Something large, something we can't fully detect." Before Voss could respond, a new alarm blared throughout the ship. The comms officer looked up, his face pale. "Captain, we've just detected a massive asteroid field ahead. It wasn't on any of our charts. It wasn't there before." Voss cursed under her breath. "Full stop now," Riker set a course around it. But it was too late. A thundering crash reverberated through the ship's hull as a cluster of asteroids slammed into the Odyssey. The ship rocked violently, alarms blaring in every corridor. Crew members scrambled to brace themselves as the impact sent shockwaves throughout the vessel. Damage report. Voss barked, her voice steely. Shields are holding, Captain, but there's a hull breach in the aft section. We've lost 2 decks, Riker reported. Can we maintain course? For now, yes, but there's more ahead, he warned. The asteroid field. It's moving. It's like they're alive, Captain. Voss's heart raced. It wasn't just a natural phenomenon. The asteroids had been scattered, yes, but there was something deliberate about it. A trap waiting for them. Get to the aft section. Seal it off. We'll push through the storm, Voss ordered. Dr. Elias, can you identify anything in the asteroid field? Is it just rock? Elias's fingers danced over the controls as she analyzed the incoming data. No, this is engineered. There are traces of alien tech embedded within the asteroid structures. Someone's been here, and they've set this up. Before she could continue, another jolt sent the ship spinning, throwing crew members to the floor. The asteroid field seemed to close in on them, growing larger with every passing second. The Odyssey was caught in the grip of an unseen force, and now they were the prey. Shields at maximum, Voss ordered, gripping the command chair. This isn't a natural storm. We're not just dealing with rocks, we're dealing with something more. Captain, we've lost our forward thrusters, the engineer called from his station. We can't avoid the asteroid cluster ahead. Voss's mind raced, calculating their limited options. The crimson signal pulsed again, its frequency now escalating, almost as if the planet itself was warning them to turn back. But there was no turning back. Brace for impact, Voss said, her voice sharp. We push through, full power to the rear thrusters. If we hit that asteroid field, we do it on our terms. The crew's resolve hardened, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They'd come too far to turn back now. As the Odyssey lurched forward, Captain Voss couldn't help but feel that they were no longer in control. This mission was no longer theirs to command. And deep in the heart of space, the Crimson World waited. The asteroid field seemed endless. For what felt like hours, the Odyssey fought its way through the jagged, tumbling masses of rock and alien technology. The ship shuddered with each impact, every new blast of debris shaking the crew to their core. The once pristine vessel now bore the scars of an unseen battle. But Captain Elara Voss never once allowed the panic to seep into her voice. The crew needed her steadiness, her focus, and they got it. The Odyssey was humanity's last hope, a gleaming symbol of all the United Earth Federation had built, bristling with advanced technology, housing the brightest minds, and commanded by Captain Elara Voss. Her reputation for leadership was spotless, but beneath that polished exterior was a woman haunted by a past that wouldn't stay buried. The Odyssey wasn't supposed to be her redemption, but when the Federation called her in for this mission, she couldn't refuse. The signal had arrived, not as a whisper, but as a loud, undeniable cry from the deepest reaches of the galaxy. It had come from the farthest edge of known space, a remote sector where no human had ever ventured. And it wasn't just a signal, it was an invitation. The Federation had analyzed the signal for weeks before deciding to launch an expedition. As the chief scientist, Dr. Rena Elias, had explained during the briefing, the message was clear but fragmented, a strange combination of ancient patterns and cryptic phrases, but most chilling of all, it was pulsing with a vibrant crimson hue. Nothing about the signal suggested anything human or even familiar. It had the unmistakable tone of something alien. Captain, we've detected a consistent pattern, Dr. Elias had said, her fingers flying over the holographic console, images of star maps flashing across the room. It's not random. Someone is out there, and they're waiting for us. Waiting for us? Voss had asked, skeptical. For what? Elias's face had darkened. I don't know, but what I do know is that this signal isn't an accident. The frequency is too precise, too deliberate. It's a beacon, a call. As the Odyssey prepared for launch, The mood aboard the ship was a mixture of exhilaration and dread. The crew had gathered in the briefing room, each member marked by their unique motivations for joining the mission. For some, it was an opportunity for scientific discovery, the chance to touch the unknown. For others, it was a matter of duty, driven by a sense of patriotism and loyalty to Earth. And for Captain Voss, it was simply another mission, a chance to distance herself from the ghosts of her past. Captain Voss, one of the officers, Lieutenant Riker, spoke up as the final preparations were underway. "There's something about this that doesn't sit right with me. Why now? Why us? What if this isn't just an invitation? What if it's a trap?" Voss turned to face him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Then we'll face it. If it's a trap, we'll outsmart them. We've trained for this." Her voice was steady, but the knot in her stomach tightened. Deep down, she knew Riker's concerns were valid, but she couldn't let that doubt show. Not now, not when humanity's future was on the line. As the Odyssey's engines roared to life, the stars outside the viewport began to stretch as the ship accelerated toward the unknown. But even as the crew settled into the routine of their journey, there was an unease that clung to them, a feeling that something was watching from the dark void beyond. Captain Voss sat alone in her quarters, reviewing the data one last time, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Why was the signal coming now? What was the true purpose of the Crimson World, the planet located just beyond the edge of the known universe? As the ship cut through the darkness, heading toward a destiny that seemed inevitable, she couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that gnawed at her. She had spent her entire career leading men and women into the unknown, but this time, the unknown seemed different. It felt personal. And in the stillness of space, as the ship hurtled forward, something else seemed to stir in the depths of the cosmos, a force beyond understanding, a force waiting for humanity to arrive. The countdown to discovery was ticking, and the Odyssey was now locked in a race against time, heading toward a world no one had ever touched, where the past and future would collide in a way no one could predict. And the first shocking revelation came in the form of a final transmission from Earth, cutting through the static of space. "Captain Voss, we've just received an update," the comms officer said, his voice strained. "The signal, it's stronger, it's pulsing faster, almost as if it's responding to us." Voss's heart skipped a beat. "Responding? Helm, full speed ahead," she ordered. "Prepare for immediate descent. We're going in." The Odyssey surged through the cold void of space, her engines humming with power, but something was amiss. Captain Elara Voss stood at the bridge's command station, watching the stars blur as the ship pushed faster, heading toward the Crimson World. There was a tension in the air, palpable even among the most seasoned crew members. No one spoke, but everyone knew something was coming, something they weren't ready for.